The transgender craze is growing and metastasizing in America and worldwide. Confusion is abounding. On Season 2 of Generation Indoctrination, we're bringing you the powerful audio version of the new ebook, Exposing the Gender Lie: How to Protect Children and Teens from the Transgender Industry's False Ideology. In the book, Summit Ministries President Dr. Jeff Myers and Christian Post reporter Brandon Showalter explore the diabolical nature of the movement and how to stop this ideology from continuing to wreak havoc. This is Chapter 3.
Chapter 3. How Trans Ideology Twists Language to Distort Reality. Quote, "The Lord said, if as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so they will not understand each other." So the Lord scattered them from there all over the earth, and they stopped building the city. Genesis 11, 6-8. Quote, "The word trans has one function, and that is to falsify reality. As soon as you have a word that can institute the lie that a man is a woman, everything is reversed." Unquote. Julia Long, British lesbian feminist and academic. Despite the term transition, which implies that hormone treatment or surgery can turn males into females and vice versa, most trans activists admit that the euphemistically labeled gender-affirming care can do no such thing. Rather, they say, it is a means of creating psychological relief, sort of like smoothing wrinkles through plastic surgery or producing a winning smile through dental implants. But there is a difference, one that is huge and unbridgeable. Changing sex is impossible. No amount of chemical intervention or surgery can change a person's sex. The XX chromosomes remain XX. The XY chromosomes remain XY. As we saw in the chapter on the transgender medical scandal, these untested and largely irreversible procedures pursue a biological impossibility. The potential for serious physical and psychological damage is immense. But there is also damage done to language itself when we begin to refer to biological males or females by opposite-sex pronouns and act as if, by our words, we can change reality. The twisting of language is a deadly serious problem. At base, the splitting of sex and gender is a distortion of language to change how people see reality. Behind the distortion is a belief that no truths about the world can be known with certainty. Rather, truth is up to the individual. In the United States, a majority now believes this. If nothing about reality is knowable, then no meaningful difference exists between male and female, or truth or a lie, or injustice or justice, or any other distinction for that matter. Words bear no clearly identifiable relationship to anything knowable. At root, the gender ideology battle is a battle over the very meaning of words. It is a twisting of language to change how people see the world. Prior to the 1960s, the words sex and gender were used interchangeably, and the word gender did not have a medicalized connotation, according to Dr. Quentin Van Meter, who heads the American College of Pediatricians. Today, in common parlance, many people still use the two words interchangeably, and it is understandable why they do. The root word of gender is the word gene, from which we get the word genetics. Genetics informs the biological word sex. The sex of the body is determined by gametes. The nucleus of every single cell in the body, except the gametes, has either XX or XY chromosomes, indicating that a person is either male or female. But with gender divorced from biological sex and redefined to mean any number of things, one of the most basic biological realities of being human, the dimorphic distinction between male and female, is denied. While many, if not most people, understand and use the word gender to mean sex, gender ideologues have built an entire theoretical edifice in support of its larger aims, namely the deconstruction of sex, even its abolition. If you can convince people to observe males and females and conclude that there is no meaningful difference, you can convince them of anything. Human communication is very powerful and unique. Although many creatures communicate, humans alone possess the glottal structures to produce phonated speech. Using just a few phonated sounds, we produce words that, when informed by a shared language, allow us to communicate in far more in-depth ways than other creatures. This ability is hardwired in humans. Only humans use language to create symbolic meaning, sequence their thoughts, and exercise free will. From the moment they are born, human babies imitate the turn-taking of conversation. They react to feelings. They discern emotions. The spoken word is so important to human babies that they are more interested in it than any other sound, even instrumental music. For most of time, it has been assumed that the words we use intentionally and reliably refer to things and ideas that are real. But if there is no such thing as knowable truth, words and reality are decoupled. Words don't describe the world, they create the world. This is at the heart of a postmodern worldview. So how does this postmodern idea relate to the gender identity issue? At present, powerful interests are twisting language to convince the populace of materially false absurdities about the human body that change the very understanding of what it means to be human. The prefix trans means to change, and the individuals who experienced some kind of body dysmorphia that manifested in confusion about one's sex were, until recent years, known as transsexuals. For many, the word connotes something extremely odd, perhaps a sexual fetish. But with the introduction of the idea that gender is malleable, people were led to question whether the distinction between male and female even exists or matters. In the gender ideology lexicon, trans does not mean to change. Along with other euphemisms like gender affirming, it is used to shroud the nature of biological reality and insert falsehoods into the public mind about the nature of being. For gender ideologues, confusion is not a bug, it is a feature. If you can get most people, or at least most influential people, to say that there is no difference between male and female, then no such difference exists. Those who insist otherwise are labeled as unfeeling, cruel, and unworthy of being heard. Because of the long-running game that activists have played to confuse the public about sex and gender, the insertion of trans has dulled the senses of the masses. It is difficult to pinpoint the exact moment when the shift from what were once known as transsexuals to transgender persons happened. But the shift was, we believe, a cunning one that was intended to mainstream transgenderism and even apply it to children. The idea of a transsexual child still creates discomfort in many people because, at least for now, most people continue to object to the sexualization of children. To refer to a child as a transsexual would make people feel uneasy. But with the introduction of a malleable gender, which might be followed by the add-ons identity and expression, the term is softened and sounds less abrasive. A transgender child could be a prepubescent youth on hormone blockers, or may just be a kid who does not conform with certain gender norms and stereotypes. This murky, catch-all label for this category of people allows for the confusion to continue and metastasize. Meanwhile, the discordance is more broadly furthered both in the child's mind and in society because of how the use of words drifts further from the ontological reality of sex. Good faith conversations and debates about these issues become impossible because there is no longer a common frame of reference within which to exchange ideas. You may think that we have gone too far in this critique of the gender ideology movement's twisting of language. Maybe you are thinking, surely it's not that big of a deal. Just let people be what they want to be. This may have been a valid criticism at some point in the past, but no longer. Children are being manipulated, abused, and mutilated. And in the pursuit of their agenda, gender ideology activists now insist that everyone else acknowledge, against reality, what people claim to be true about themselves. Even if you innocently use the wrong pronouns, you may be socially shamed or even fired from your job. Therapists risk professional censure if they do not affirm the gender expressions claimed by minor patients. Earlier, we stated that the denial of knowable truth means that because words bear no relationship to reality, we are free to use words to create whatever world we want. The big question is, who are the we? To gender ideology activists, the we are those who learn to control the channels of communication to insist on a certain use of language and silence or marginalize those who dispute that use. It was this danger that George Orwell warned about in his classic 1984. Those supporting the totalitarian dictator Big Brother invented newspeak, a way of changing language to limit the range of expression and thus thought. One character, Syme, gloried in his control of language, telling the protagonist, Winston, quote, "You don't grasp the beauty of the destruction of words," unquote. A few sentences later, Syme says chillingly, quote, "Don't you see that the whole aim of newspeak is to narrow the range of thought? In the end, we shall make thought crime literally impossible, because there will be no words in which to express it," unquote. Not all twisting of language is done in the service of totalitarian aims. Sometimes propaganda is used to sell products or influence votes without any thought to its long-term consequences. But we should think very soberly when we notice people distorting language in a self-serving way. Before calling for the extermination of the rival Tutsis, the Rwandan Hutu tribe trained its members to think of Tutsis as cockroaches. Hitler trained the Nazis to think of Jews as vermin. As the late Hillsdale College professor Michael Bauman often warned, quote, When words lose their meaning, people lose their lives, unquote. Hundreds of years before the 21st century's twisting of language, the philosopher Voltaire warned, quote, "Truly, whoever can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities," unquote. To his statement, we might add, quote, "And there is no better way to make someone believe in absurdities than by twisting language, our very means of communication, into something utterly unrecognizable," unquote. Voltaire penned his warning in a 1765 work called Questions sur les miracles, a missive against corruption in the church that he thought would lead to bloodshed. In one of history's great ironies, Voltaire's work was used by French revolutionaries to turn the tables, attack the church and other institutions, and behead its enemies until the blood of tens of thousands flowed in the streets of Paris. In the 20th century, the progeny of the French revolutionaries, Nazis and communists, demonstrated that the slaughter of hundreds of millions, that the radically secularist inclination to overthrow reality was the most devastating of all history's religious movements. The famed psychologist Philip Rieff noted that a culture unravels, quote, "when its normative institutions fail to communicate ideals in ways that remain inwardly compelling," unquote. The antidote to culture-depleting indoctrination is to think critically and tell the truth, even in the face of deception. But this is something many people are afraid to do. In the national poll Summit Ministries has conducted, most people believe that the transgender movement has gone too far, yet nearly half of the people who believe that do not say anything so as not to offend anyone. What we have come to know as transgenderism, a word that, as we have pointed out, has no concrete meaning or defining boundaries, is a cultural salute to a postmodern worldview that intends to deconstruct the very idea of truth and overhaul language to serve the aims of activists. Postmodernism views the way any given culture uses language as a prison house that prevents us from fulfilling our truest potential and greatest personal power. But changing language is itself a power play. As Jean Edward Veith prophetically argued nearly 30 years ago in his book Postmodern Times, moral judgments about matters continue to emerge in everything postmodernists write, despite their best attempts to avoid them. He writes, quote, "The very claim that certain power structures are oppressive, repeated over and over in postmodern scholarship, implies a moral principle, that it is not good to oppress people. Postmodernists, more than most people, complain about how various power structures are unfair, and they are always demanding more sensitivity, tolerance, and justice. Do they not realize that they are appealing to transcendent, authoritative moral absolutes? Do they mean what they say, holding honestly to the implications of their own theory, or is it a mask for some other agenda?" Unquote. For gender ideologues and the various players who stand to profit from the deconstruction of sex, this battle over language is winner takes all. As Veith also observed, it is vital for Christians to understand that language, God's language, His Word, has existed before the physical universe and is intrinsic to thought, personality, and His unfathomable being. In the biblical narrative of creation, it only takes 3 chapters before the twisting of language in the mouth of the serpent, who is, according to Scripture, Satan himself, calls into question the goodness of God's creation. Satan's question echoes today. Did God really say? Genesis 3, verse 1. Indeed, among the most pernicious aspects of twisting language is that people are required, if they want to be socially acceptable, to participate in lies. This is not merely the modulation of language that occurs through time. It is an undoing of the very idea that the words we use refer to anything real. Followers of Jesus must understand the full implication of a biblical worldview. Speaking to his disciples in John chapter 8, Jesus said that by following his teachings, quote, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free," unquote. The word used for truth in this passage means reality. It is not inaccurate to render that passage, "You will know reality, and reality will set you free." The psychiatrist M. Scott Peck said, quote, "Mental health is an ongoing process of dedication to reality at all costs," unquote. Acknowledging reality is not only vital for us as individuals, it is also vital for the continuation of society. Our ability to achieve attunement, or social connection, requires relationships based on a shared understanding of reality. The gender ideology movement insists that for humans to be free to pursue their fullest self-interests, reality itself must be deconstructed. But reality is a stubborn thing. It is knowable. It cares little about our perceptions if those perceptions do not line up with the way things really are. In relation to sex and gender, regardless of our linguistic machinations, our sex as male or female is stamped on nearly every cell of the body. No matter what linguistic tools are employed to achieve this end, It is a vain effort that will fail. The attack on language as an attack on reality itself is nothing new. Genesis 11 records an account in which people of the earth built a city called Babel with a tall tower to signify their success in making themselves into gods. It was an entirely unworkable pursuit. No human-constructed edifice could overthrow God. Today, as educational institutions and the medical industry aim to construct a newfangled Babel, let us call it the Tower of Gender at the risk of sounding too dramatic, it too holds out the unworkable pursuit of changing one's sex. It too is a project of attempting to make a name for oneself and attempting to play God. And if the past is prologue, what happened to the ancient people who built a large tower is starting to happen to those building a tower of synthetic bodies via hormones and surgeries. The confusion of language leads, inevitably, to confusion in all things.
Thank you for listening. Go over to the show notes to see how you can download Exposing the Gender Lie, How to Protect Children and Teens from the Transgender Industry's False Ideology ebook free from the Christian Post. And be sure to find out more about Dr. Jeff Myers and Summit Ministries at summit.org.